The Wanderer's Tale, Chapter 1. The unexpected journey begins. Once upon a time, in a small village nestled between towering mountains in a wide, glittering river, there lived a man named Daniel. Daniel was an ordinary fellow. He worked as a carpenter, repairing roofs and building furniture for the people in the village. He enjoyed his quiet, simple life. His days consisted of crafting, taking walks along the river, and chatting with the townsfolk in the evening. One crisp autumn morning, as Daniel was mending an old wooden cart, a stranger approached him. The man was tall, with a scraggly beard and deep-set eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. His clothes were tattered, and his boots were covered in mud, suggesting that he had traveled a long distance. Without a word, the stranger handed Daniel a small, intricately carved wooden box. The box was no larger than a loaf of bread, but it was heavy, as if filled with something important. Curious, Daniel looked up at the man, but before he could ask any questions, the stranger spoke in a deep, gravelly voice. "Take this box to the city of Alther. It is of great importance. The fate of many depends on it." Daniel was taken aback. "I'm just a carpenter," he protested. "I've never even been beyond the village borders." The stranger shook his head slowly. "You are the one chosen for this task. Do not question it." And with that, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the mist that had begun to rise from the river. Confused and a little frightened, Daniel looked down at the box in his hands. What could possibly be inside? Why had he been chosen to deliver it? And why Alther, a city so far away that most villagers only spoke of it in legends? That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The box sat on his small wooden table, staring back at him like an unsolved mystery. His mind raced with questions, but no answers came. By dawn, he had made up his mind. He would take the box to Alther, even though the journey would be long and dangerous. He didn't know what lay ahead, but something inside him, perhaps a sense of duty or a curiosity he had never felt before, urged him forward. Chapter 2. Into the wilderness. The next morning, Daniel packed a small bag. He took a loaf of bread, some dried meat, a water flask, and his trusted knife. Slinging the bag over his shoulder and clutching the mysterious box tightly, he set off. His first steps outside the village felt surreal. The path ahead led into a thick forest, which marked the boundary between his familiar world and the unknown. As Daniel ventured deeper into the woods, the trees grew taller and closer together, blocking out most of the sunlight. The air was damp, and the smell of moss and wet earth filled his nostrils. Occasionally, he heard the rustling of small animals in the underbrush, but otherwise, it was eerily quiet. He had never been in this part of the forest before, and it was easy to feel lost among the towering trees. For hours, he walked, not entirely sure if he was heading in the right direction. Just as he began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake, he heard a rustling sound behind him. He spun around, his heart pounding in his chest. From the shadows emerged a small, shaggy creature. It stood on two legs, its fur a deep brown, and its eyes twinkled mischievously. "Lost, are we?" the creature asked in a high-pitched voice. Daniel blinked in surprise. He had never seen anything like it before. What are you?" Daniel stammered. The creature laughed, a sound like tinkling bells. "Names are not important in these woods," it said. "But if you must call me something, call me Bingle." "Bingle?" Daniel repeated, still unsure of what he was dealing with. "Do you live here?" The creature nodded. "I live everywhere and nowhere. But you, my friend, seem to be far from home. Where are you headed?" Daniel hesitated. Could he trust this strange being? But something about Bingle's twinkling eyes made him feel at ease. "I'm on my way to Alther," he said, "to deliver a box." Bingle's eyes widened. "Alther? That's quite the journey for a simple carpenter. What's in the box?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "A stranger gave it to me and told me to deliver it. He said it was important." Bingle tapped a furry finger against his chin, thinking. "Important, you say? Well, I'm heading that way myself. Perhaps we can travel together. These woods can be tricky for someone unfamiliar with them." Grateful for the company, Daniel agreed. And so, the two unlikely companions set off together through the forest. As they walked, Bingle entertained Daniel with stories of the forest, tales of magical creatures, hidden treasures, and ancient legends that few outside the woods had ever heard. Chapter 3: The Enchanted River. After 2 days of traveling, Daniel and Bingle reached a wide river. Its waters were a shimmering blue, almost too vibrant to be real. "This is the Enchanted River," Bingle explained. "It's said that anyone who drinks from it gains visions of the future." Daniel stared at the water, feeling a strange pull toward it. Could it really show him the future? He crouched down by the riverbank and scooped up some water in his hands. It was cool and refreshing, but as soon as he drank it, his vision blurred. The world around him seemed to dissolve, and in its place, he saw flashes of things he didn't understand. He saw a tall, dark tower standing alone in a barren wasteland. Inside the tower, a glowing figure held the box, the same box he was carrying. The figure whispered something, but Daniel couldn't hear the words. Then, the vision shifted, and he saw himself standing at the gates of Alther, the box still in his hands. Just as suddenly as the vision began, it ended, and Daniel found himself back by the river, gasping for breath. Bingle was watching him closely. "You saw something, didn't you?" Daniel nodded, still trying to make sense of it. "I saw a tower. And someone holding this box." Bingle's expression grew serious. "The Tower of Shadows," he muttered under his breath. "I had hoped we wouldn't have to deal with that." Chapter 4: Secrets of the Tower. The words Tower of Shadows sent a chill through Daniel's spine. Bingle didn't elaborate at first, but Daniel sensed that whatever the tower was, it wasn't a place anyone visited lightly. "Bingo," Daniel asked cautiously, "what is the Tower of Shadows? And why would the box be there?" Bingle sighed, sitting down on a rock near the riverbank. His usual playful demeanor had faded. "The Tower of Shadows is a place few have ever seen. Fewer still have returned from it. Some say it was built by ancient beings, others say it appeared out of nowhere one day, as if summoned by dark magic. Whatever the truth is, it's a place of power, and that power is dangerous. Why would someone in Alther need me to take the box there?" Daniel wondered aloud. Bingle shook his head. "I don't know. But if your vision is connected to the tower, we must be cautious. Powerful forces are at play, Daniel, and you're now tangled in their web." They sat in silence for a moment, the river's soft gurgling the only sound. Daniel stared down at the box again. It was simple and unassuming on the outside, but after the vision and Bingle's words, it felt much heavier in his hands. "We should keep moving," Bingle said, rising to his feet and brushing the dirt from his fur. "The road to Alther is long, and the sooner we reach it, the better." Daniel nodded and stood, glancing at the river one last time before they resumed their journey. The enchanted river soon faded into the background, replaced by dense trees and the occasional call of distant birds. As they walked, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching them. Chapter 5: the watchers in the woods. By late afternoon, the forest had grown darker, even though the sun was still high. Shadows seemed to stretch longer, and the trees loomed closer, as if they were leaning in, observing the two travelers. Daniel could hear the crackling of twigs behind him, though whenever he turned around, he saw nothing. "Bingle, do you feel that?" Daniel whispered, glancing around nervously. "Like we're being watched." The little creature stopped and sniffed the air. His nose twitched and his eyes narrowed. "We are," Bingle said in a hushed tone. "The Watchers." Daniel's heart began to race. "The Watchers? What are they?" "No one knows exactly what they are," Bingle replied quietly, scanning the trees. "Some say they are spirits of the forest, others say they are the eyes of the tower itself, sent out to watch those who come near. They don't usually attack, but we must be careful." A sudden rustling sound came from the bushes nearby, and Daniel froze. His hand instinctively went to the knife at his side, though he wasn't sure how much good it would do against mysterious forest spirits. For a moment, everything was still. Then, from the shadows emerged a figure, tall, cloaked, and faceless. The figure's body seemed to blend into the darkness, as though it was made of the shadows themselves. Bingle stepped in front of Daniel, his small body tense but ready. "State your purpose, Watcher," Bingle called out, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. The Watcher stood silently for a long moment, its presence unnerving. Then, in a low, echoing voice, it spoke. "The one who carries the box must beware." Daniel clenched the box tighter. "Beware of what?" "The tower calls to you," the Watcher said, its words hanging in the air like a cold mist. "But not all who enter its shadow leave unscathed. Turn back, or face the consequences." Daniel's mouth went dry. He looked at Bingle, but the creature's face was unreadable. "I can't turn back," Daniel finally said, his voice firm despite his fear. "I have a duty." The Watcher's cloak seemed to shift, as though the shadows within were swirling. "Then know this, the box is not what it seems. What it holds can change the world." Before Daniel could ask more, the figure dissolved into the darkness, leaving nothing but silence behind. Chapter 6, The Desert of Bones. After the encounter with the Watcher, neither Daniel or Bingle spoke for a long time. They simply pressed on, the forest slowly giving way to rocky terrain. By evening, they reached the edge of the forest, where the landscape abruptly shifted to a barren desert. The ground was cracked and dry, and the wind howled across the empty expanse, carrying with it a fine dust that stung Daniel's eyes. "This is the Desert of Bones," Bingle said solemnly. "We must cross it to reach Alther. But be warned, many have perished here, lost to the sands or to the creatures that roam it." Daniel gazed out over the endless stretch of desert, feeling a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. Why is it called the Desert of Bones? Because those who don't make it across are never found, except for their bones, bleached white by the sun, Bingle replied grimly. "We'll need to keep moving, even at night. The heat during the day is too intense, and the creatures that roam the sands hunt at dusk." They waited until the sun had sunk below the horizon before setting out. The desert at night was eerily quiet, save for the occasional distant howl of some unknown beast. The stars overhead were bright, but offered little comfort as the cold night air bit at Daniel's skin. He kept the box close, feeling its weight more acutely now. Hours passed, and the flat expanse of the desert seemed to stretch on forever. As they walked, Daniel noticed strange shapes scattered across the sand, rocks, or so he thought at first. But as they drew closer, he realized they weren't rocks at all. They were bones, human bones. The wind whistled mournfully through the skeletal remains, as if the desert itself was whispering forgotten stories of those who had come before. Daniel shuddered but pressed on, determined not to let fear get the best of him. Then, just as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, Daniel heard a sound, faint at first, but growing louder. A clicking noise, like the clattering of bones. He froze, turning toward the source of the sound. Out of the shadows emerged a figure, hunched and twisted, its body made entirely of bones. Its eyes, glowing pinpricks of light, locked onto Daniel and Bingle. Bingle drew a small blade from his side and hissed under his breath. "Bone walkers," he muttered. "Stay close to me." The bone walker moved quickly, its skeletal limbs rattling with each step. Daniel felt his heart race. He clutched the box tighter, unsure if he should run or fight. Before he could decide, more bone walkers emerged from the shadows, their clattering growing louder, surrounding them. "Whatever happens, do not drop that box," Bingle ordered, his voice sharp. "These creatures are drawn to it." Daniel swallowed hard and nodded, preparing himself for whatever was about to come next. The first bone walker lunged at Daniel with surprising speed, its bony fingers reaching out to grab him. In an instant, Bingo leapt into action, darting in front of Daniel and slashing at the creature's legs with his small but sharp blade. The bone walker let out a high-pitched screech as it stumbled back, its leg bones crumbling to dust. But there were more, many more. Chapter 7, Battle in the Sand. Daniel's pulse quickened as more bone walkers encircled them, their glowing eyes flickering like the last embers of a dying fire. Their bones clicked and rattled with every step, a haunting sound that seemed to grow louder with each passing second. Bingle fought fiercely, darting between the creatures, his blade flashing in the moonlight as he severed their limbs. But for every bone walker that crumbled to dust, two more emerged from the shadows, their skeletal hands reaching for the box Daniel held. "Keep moving," Bingle shouted over his shoulder. "They won't stop coming." Daniel's mind raced, adrenaline pumping through his veins. He knew he had to do something, but he felt trapped. The bone walkers were relentless, their bony fingers clawing at him, their hollow eye sockets fixed on the box. Instinctively, he swung his knife at one of the creatures, its brittle bones shattering under the force of his strike. But as soon as it fell, another took its place. There was no end to them. Suddenly, one of the bone walkers managed to grab hold of Daniel's arm, its cold, skeletal grip tightening around his wrist. Daniel cried out, struggling to free himself, but the creature's strength was unnerving. It pulled him toward it, its other hand reaching for the box. "No!" Daniel yelled, clutching the box with all his might. Bingle saw the struggle and rushed to Daniel's side, slicing through the bone walker's arm with a swift, clean strike. The creature shrieked and collapsed into a pile of bones, but Daniel was left shaken. "We have to get out of here," Daniel shouted, breathing heavily. "There's too many of them." Bingle nodded, his fur matted with dust. "There's a ridge up ahead," he said, pointing to a distant rocky outcrop rising from the desert sands. "If we can reach it, we might be able to lose them in the rocks." With renewed determination, Daniel and Bingle sprinted toward the ridge. The bone walkers followed, their clattering footsteps echoing behind them, but Daniel could feel the distance growing. The creatures were fast, but they were also clumsy, and the shifting sands slowed their pursuit. As they reached the base of the ridge, Bingle climbed up nimbly, while Daniel scrambled behind him, using his free hand to pull himself up. The rocky surface was jagged and steep, but Daniel didn't stop. The sound of the bone walkers grew fainter as they ascended, the creatures struggling to follow. At last, they reached a narrow ledge near the top of the ridge. From there, Daniel could see the bonewalkers milling around below, their skeletal bodies unable to climb the steep rocks. For the moment, they were safe. Daniel collapsed against the rock face, his chest heaving with exhaustion. Bingle sat beside him, also catching his breath. The box, still clutched tightly in Daniel's hands, felt heavier than ever. That was close, Daniel panted, wiping sweat from his brow. Too close. Bingle agreed. He glanced down at the bonewalkers, who were slowly dispersing, disappearing back into the desert. They're drawn to the box. Whatever's inside, it has power, enough to stir even the dead. Daniel looked at the box, his curiosity and dread growing. What could possibly be inside that's worth all this trouble? Bingle shook his head. I don't know. But if the bonewalkers wanted it, then it's more dangerous than we thought. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun slowly rise over the desert, casting long shadows across the dunes. The danger had passed, but Daniel knew it was only temporary. Whatever awaited them in Alther, and whatever was inside the box, was bound to be even more perilous than what they had just faced. Chapter 8. The City of Alther. 2 more days passed as Daniel and Bingle continued their trek across the desert. The nights were bitterly cold, and the days were scorching, but eventually, the desert gave way to rolling hills and grassy plains. And there, on the horizon, Daniel finally saw it, the fabled city of Alther. Alther was unlike anything Daniel had ever imagined. Towering stone walls surrounded the city, their surfaces etched with ancient ruins that glowed faintly in the sunlight. Tall spires and domes rose above the walls, gleaming in gold and silver, while narrow bridges connected them like threads in a vast tapestry. The gates were massive, made of iron and adorned with intricate carvings of mythical beasts. Daniel felt a strange mix of awe and apprehension as they approached the city. He had heard stories of Alther, stories of its wealth, its power, and its secrets. But now, standing at its gates, he realized that those stories barely scratched the surface. "Welcome to Alther," Bingle said quietly, his voice tinged with both admiration and caution. "It's a place of wonders, and of dangers." As they reached the gates, Daniel was surprised to find no guards. Instead, a large metal eye was embedded in the gate's center, its lid half-closed as if it were asleep. Bingle walked up to the eye and rapped on the gate with the hilt of his blade. Immediately, the eye snapped open, revealing a swirling, glowing pupil that scanned Daniel and Bingle. A deep voice boomed from the gate, startling Daniel. "Who seeks entrance to Alther?" The voice demanded. "I am Daniel, a carpenter from the village of Eldrin," Daniel said, trying to sound confident. "I have come to deliver a box." The eye narrowed suspiciously. "A box, you say?" Daniel held up the wooden box, feeling its weight shift slightly in his hands. The eye studied it for a long moment, its glowing pupil flickering. Finally, the gate began to creak open, the sound of grinding metal echoing through the air. "Enter," the voice said. "But be warned, Alther is not as it seems." With a sense of foreboding, Daniel and Bingle stepped through the gates and into the city. The streets of Alther were bustling with life. Merchants called out from their stalls, selling everything from exotic fruits to enchanted trinkets. People from all walks of life wandered the streets, nobles in fine robes, travelers from distant lands, and mysterious figures cloaked in shadow. But despite the vibrant energy of the city, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "The Tower of Shadows," Bingle muttered as they walked through the crowded streets. "It's at the heart of this city. We'll need to find it." Daniel's eyes scanned the skyline, and sure enough, rising above the rest of the city, he saw a dark, looming tower. It was taller than any building he had ever seen, its surface black as obsidian, reflecting no light. There were no windows, no doors, just a monolithic structure that seemed to absorb everything around it. "Do we really have to go there?" Daniel asked, his voice trembling slightly. Bingo nodded. "That's where the box belongs. And whatever answers we seek will be found inside." As they made their way toward the tower, Daniel noticed more and more people watching them. Their gazes were intense, filled with suspicion or curiosity. Whispers followed them, though Daniel couldn't make out what was being said. When they finally reached the base of the Tower of Shadows, Daniel hesitated. The air around it was heavy, as if the tower itself was radiating a palpable sense of dread. "This is it," Bingle said quietly. "Are you ready?" Daniel swallowed hard, his fingers tightening around the box. "I don't think I'll ever be ready," he admitted. "But we've come this far. I have to see this through." With a deep breath, Daniel stepped forward, ready to face whatever awaited him inside the Tower of Shadows. Chapter 9. The Heart of Darkness. As they approached the base of the tower, a low hum filled the air. The structure seemed alive, vibrating with a faint energy that made the hairs on Daniel's arms stand on end. There was no visible entrance, no grand door to knock on, just smooth, black stone. Daniel's stomach tightened with unease. "How do we get in?" Daniel asked, glancing at Bingle, who appeared just as puzzled. Before Bingle could answer, the ground beneath them began to shift. The stones under their feet slid apart, revealing a spiraling staircase that descended deep into the earth. From below, a cold draft drifted upward, carrying with it the faint scent of damp stone and something else Daniel couldn't quite place, something metallic, almost like blood. "Well, I suppose that answers the question," Bingle said grimly. Chapter 9. The Heart of Darkness. Daniel stared down the spiraling staircase that had appeared beneath his feet. The cold draft that rose from the depths of the tower sent shivers through his body, but he knew he had no choice but to descend. The box in his hands felt heavier than ever, as if it were resisting what lay ahead. Chapter 9. The Heart of Darkness. Daniel stared down the spiraling staircase that had appeared beneath his feet. The cold draft that rose from the depths of the tower sent shivers through his body, but he knew he had no choice but to descend. The box in his hands felt heavier than ever, as if it were resisting what lay ahead. "Stay close," Bingle muttered, his usual bravado subdued by the eerie atmosphere. He hopped onto the first step, his small form disappearing into the shadows. With a deep breath, Daniel followed, gripping the box tightly as he descended into the unknown. The staircase spiraled downward for what felt like an eternity. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, and the light from above faded until they were enveloped in complete darkness. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest, his footsteps echoing off the stone walls. Every now and then, he would hear a faint whisper, but when he stopped to listen, it would disappear. Finally, after what seemed like hours, they reached the bottom. The staircase opened into a vast, circular chamber lit by a faint, eerie glow emanating from the walls. The light seemed to pulse, like a heartbeat, casting long shadows that danced across the floor. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal made of the same black stone as the tower itself. It was empty. "This is it," Bingle whispered, his voice barely audible in the still air. "The heart of the tower." Daniel took a hesitant step forward, his eyes locked on the pedestal. "Do I put the box there?" Bingle nodded, but his eyes were filled with caution. "I think that's what it wants. But be ready for anything, Daniel. The Tower of Shadows doesn't give without taking something in return." Daniel swallowed hard, his hands trembling as he approached the pedestal. He placed the box on its surface, the wood creaking softly as it settled into place. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence was suffocating, and Daniel's heart raced as he waited for something, anything, to happen. Then, with a low rumble, the walls of the chamber began to shift. The faint light intensified, and the air grew thick with energy. The pedestal began to glow, and slowly, the box started to open on its own. Daniel held his breath as the lid lifted, revealing the contents inside. It was a key, but not just any key. The key was made of a strange, gleaming metal that seemed to ripple with power. Symbols were etched along its surface, symbols that Daniel couldn't read but somehow understood. They were ancient, powerful, and filled with meaning. As the key floated gently above the box, a deep voice filled the chamber, echoing from the very walls themselves. "You have brought the key to unlock the shadows." Daniel's skin prickled. What does that mean? The voice ignored his question, continuing its ominous chant. The tower holds the secrets of the world. The key unlocks the heart. But beware, for knowledge comes with a price. The air around them began to hum, and suddenly, a doorway appeared in the far wall, tall, arched, and shimmering with an otherworldly light. It was as if the tower had opened a portal to somewhere beyond its walls, somewhere far more dangerous. Bingle stepped forward, his eyes wide. That's it. The inner sanctum of the tower. Daniel glanced at the doorway, then back at the key. The temptation to enter was overwhelming, but the warning from the watcher echoed in his mind. Not all who enter its shadow leave unscathed. Do we go through? Daniel asked, his voice wavering with uncertainty. Bingle hesitated, his small face etched with concern. If we do, there's no turning back. What lies beyond is beyond even my understanding. Daniel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had come this far, risked everything to deliver the box and uncover its secrets. He couldn't stop now, not when he was so close. "We have to," Daniel said, his voice steadier now. "Whatever is on the other side, it's the answer. We have to know." Bingle nodded, though Daniel could see the tension in his eyes. "Then let's go. But stay close." Together, they stepped toward the doorway, the light from the portal casting an ethereal glow on their faces. As they crossed the threshold, Daniel felt a sudden pull, like gravity shifting, and the world around them blurred. Chapter 10, The Realm Beyond, when the world came back into focus. Daniel and Bingle found themselves standing in a vast, open expanse. But it wasn't like anything Daniel had ever seen before. The sky above them was a swirling mass of dark clouds, shot through with streaks of lightning that never touched the ground. The landscape was a mix of jagged rocks and barren plains, stretching as far as the eye could see. In the distance, Daniel saw something strange, a colossal structure, towering over the horizon. It wasn't the Tower of Shadows. It was something far older, far more alien. Massive arches and spires twisted into impossible shapes, defying the laws of nature. "This isn't Alther," Daniel whispered, feeling the weight of the realm pressing down on him. "No," Bingle agreed, his voice hushed. "This is the Shadow Realm. The place where the tower draws its power." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. The air here was thick, almost suffocating, and the shadows seemed to move of their own accord. Every step felt like walking through molasses, as though the very ground resisted their presence. "We need to find out why the box brought us here," Bingle said, scanning the horizon. "This place is dangerous, and the longer we stay, the more it will consume us." They walked through the desolate landscape, their footsteps echoing in the emptiness. As they moved closer to the colossal structure in the distance, Daniel noticed strange markings on the ground, symbols similar to the ones on the key. They seemed to pulse with a faint energy, guiding them forward. The structure loomed closer, And as they approached, Daniel could see that it wasn't just a building, it was a prison. Massive chains wrapped around its base, anchoring it to the ground, while dark energy crackled along its surface. "What is this place?" Daniel asked, his voice barely a whisper. Bingle's eyes narrowed as he studied the structure. This is where the tower keeps what it has stolen. Souls, knowledge, power, it's all locked away here. A sudden movement caught Daniel's eye. From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, cloaked, and radiating a dark energy. It was unlike the Bonewalkers or the Watchers. This figure was something else, something far more dangerous. "The Keeper of Shadows," Bingle said, his voice filled with dread. The Keeper glided toward them, its presence suffocating. "You have come to free the shadow," it said, its voice a low growl that reverberated through the air. "But do you understand what you are about to unleash?" Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. "We came to deliver the box," he said, holding it up. "We were told it holds the key." The Keeper's eyes, two glowing orbs of darkness, fixed on the key that hovered above the box. "The key unlocks the prison. But once opened, the shadow cannot be contained." Bingle stepped forward, his small body tense. "What is the shadow? What will it do if we release it?" The Keeper's voice grew darker, more ominous. "The shadow is knowledge. It is power. But it is also chaos. Once unleashed, it will consume everything in its path, starting with you." Daniel felt his grip on the box tighten. The temptation to unlock the prison was overwhelming, but the warnings rang loud in his ears. The shadow was dangerous. But it was also the answer he had been seeking. "What do we do, Bingle?" Daniel asked, his voice shaking. Bingle looked at him, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "This is your choice, Daniel. The key is yours. But know this, once you unlock the prison, there is no going back." Daniel stood at the crossroads of fate, the key in his hands, the future of the world hanging in the balance. Chapter 10, The Realm Beyond. Daniel stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest, the weight of the key pressing down on his palm. The Keeper of Shadows loomed before him, its dark presence almost unbearable. Bingle waited at his side, tense and silent. The air was thick with anticipation, as though the very fabric of reality held its breath. Daniel's mind raced. He had come so far, risked so much, and now he was standing on the edge of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. But the thought of walking away, of leaving this dark prison sealed, gnawed at him. The shadow held knowledge, truths beyond anything he could comprehend. Could he really turn his back on that? His fingers tightened around the key. "I have to know," Daniel whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "I have to see what's inside." Bingle's eyes flicked to the Keeper of Shadows, who watched them in eerie silence. "Daniel," Bingle warned, "there's still time to walk away. Once you open it, there's no undoing what's unleashed." Daniel swallowed hard. His pulse pounded in his ears, and his hands shook slightly as he raised the key. The symbols along its surface glowed brighter, as if they were responding to his decision. The key seemed alive in his hand, vibrating with raw energy. "I'm doing it," Daniel said, his voice stronger now. "We've come too far to turn back." With a deep breath, Daniel stepped toward the massive structure, the prison that towered before them. The key in his hand pulsed with a power that seemed to resonate with the very air around them. As he approached the massive chains that bound the prison, the Keeper of Shadows glided back, watching but making no move to stop him. The key slid into a lock that Daniel hadn't noticed before, an invisible mechanism within the stone itself. As the key turned, A deep, resonant click echoed through the ground. The chains rattled violently, and a dark, swirling energy began to seep from the cracks in the stone. The prison shuddered as if something deep within it was awakening. "Step back," Bingle urged, his voice tight with fear. Daniel stumbled back as the ground trembled beneath them. The air grew colder, sharper, as if the very essence of the realm was being drained. The chains snapped one by one, each breaking with a deafening crack that reverberated through the dark expanse. The structure split open, and from its depths, a shadowy figure emerged, a towering, formless mass of darkness. It twisted and writhed, its edges flickering like smoke, yet it was solid, menacing. The shadow had been freed. The Keeper of Shadows lowered its head as the dark entity rose into the sky. "It is done," it said quietly. "The shadow is no longer bound." Daniel felt a surge of energy rush through him, his body vibrating with the raw power of the shadow. The entity hovered above them, its presence oppressive and terrifying. The air around them shimmered as the shadow began to expand, its dark tendrils reaching out toward the horizon, consuming everything in its path. "What have I done?" Daniel whispered, watching in horror as the world around him started to warp under the influence of the shadow. The Keeper of Shadows turned its glowing eyes on Daniel. "You have unleashed knowledge," it said. "But knowledge is a weapon, and the shadow hungers." Bingle's small hand gripped Daniel's arm. "We need to get out of here, now," he said urgently, but Daniel couldn't move. His gaze was locked on the shadow as it twisted and grew, spreading across the barren landscape. It wasn't just destroying, it was absorbing, devouring everything in its path. And with each thing it consumed, it grew stronger, darker, more menacing. The ground beneath them began to crumble, the landscape itself buckling under the weight of the shadow. Daniel snapped out of his trance, adrenaline flooding his veins. "We have to go," he shouted, pulling Bingle with him as they sprinted back toward the portal that had brought them into this strange realm. But the portal was gone. Panic surged through Daniel as he looked around, searching for any way out. The shadow was closing in, its dark tendrils slithering across the ground, hungry and unstoppable. There was nowhere to run, no way to escape. "Bingle, what do we do?" Daniel yelled, his voice trembling with fear. Bingle's eyes darted around, but he had no answer. "I don't know. This wasn't supposed to happen." The shadow's presence was suffocating now, its darkness blotting out the sky, the land, everything. It was pure chaos, an ancient force beyond anything Daniel could have imagined. And it was coming for him. Suddenly, the ground beneath Daniel gave way, and he fell. He tumbled through the darkness, the shadow swirling around him, pulling him deeper into its depths. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The world was dissolving, everything breaking apart, and then silence. Chapter 11. The Shadow's Gift. When Daniel opened his eyes, he wasn't sure if he was still alive. The oppressive weight of the shadow was gone, but so was everything else. He found himself standing in a vast, featureless void, an expanse of nothingness that stretched endlessly in every direction. There was no light, no sound, just emptiness. He looked around, confused and disoriented. "Bingle?" He called out, but his voice was swallowed by the void. For a long moment, Daniel stood there, unsure of what to do. Then, a familiar voice broke the silence. "You have unlocked the Shadow's prison." Daniel spun around and saw the Keeper of Shadows standing before him, its form now more distinct, more solid, as if the Shadow's release had empowered it. "Where am I?" Daniel asked, his voice shaking. "You stand in the space between," the Keeper replied. "The shadow has consumed the realm you knew. But it has left you alive, for now." Daniel's mind raced, trying to make sense of what had happened. "What does it want from me?" he demanded. The keeper's glowing eyes seemed to flicker. "The shadow offers you a choice. You have unlocked its prison, unleashed its power. Now, you can claim that power as your own." Daniel took a step back, his heart pounding. "What are you talking about?" "The shadow holds the knowledge of worlds, of life, death, and everything in between," the keeper explained. "But it is also chaos, destruction. It will consume all in its path unless you control it." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. "Control it? How?" The keeper extended a hand, and suddenly, the key appeared in Daniel's palm once more. But this time, it wasn't just a key. It was pulsing with energy, vibrating with the power of the shadow itself. "You can wield the shadow's power," the keeper said. "But it will come at a cost." Daniel stared at the key, feeling the immense power surging through it. He could feel the weight of the decision before him. If he took the shadow's power, he would be bound to it, forever changed. But if he refused, the shadow would continue to consume everything in its path, unstoppable. "What's the cost?" Daniel asked quietly. The keeper's voice was soft, almost sympathetic. "You will no longer be who you were. The shadow will reshape you, make you its vessel. But you will have the power to reshape the world or destroy it." Daniel's mind reeled. Could he really do it? Could he control something so dangerous, so chaotic? And even if he could, what kind of person would he become? But what choice did he have? If he didn't stop the shadow, it would devour everything. And if he didn't act now, there might not be another chance. With trembling hands, Daniel gripped the key tightly and made his decision. "I accept." Chapter 12. The Shadow's Ascendant. The moment Daniel spoke the words, the key in his hand exploded with light, dark, swirling light that enveloped him completely. The void around him pulsed with energy as the shadow flowed into him, merging with his very essence. It was overwhelming, a flood of power so intense that Daniel thought he might be torn apart, but he wasn't. He endured. And slowly, the chaos settled. When the light faded, Daniel stood transformed. The void around him had disappeared, replaced by a new realm, a world shaped by the shadow's influence, but now under his control. The darkness still lingered, but it no longer consumed him. Instead, it obeyed him. The keeper of shadows bowed its head. "You have become the shadow's master. The world is yours to command." Daniel took a deep breath, feeling the immense power coursing through him. He was no longer the simple carpenter from Eldarn. He was something far more. He had the power to reshape reality, to bend the world to his will. But with that power came responsibility. Daniel looked out across the new world he had created. The shadow still pulsed within him, chaotic and dangerous, but he held it in check. He would wield its power, but he would not let it control him. He was the master of the shadow, and the future was his to shape. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video. Have a nice day.